Well, good afternoon, or almost afternoon, everyone. How are you? Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I always like to, start with my story about how I transitioned to do what I do now. And before I get started, I think the mic. All right, great. Sorry about that. I like to move sometimes, but we'll work this. Okay. I think I have a sign-up sheet or something that's going around, so everyone doesn't do it after. I send out a lot of good information about upcoming events and vegan tips and cooking and all that. So if you want to be on that list, please do sign up. Okay. Yeah. All right, here we go. So I was, my PhD is actually in industrial and systems engineering. And right now I do holistic nutrition. And there's an interesting story as to how that happened. In 2007, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And I say I was really, really shocked about that. Because I thought I was living relatively healthy, doing all the right things, exercising, eating what I thought was a healthy diet. And so when I got the diagnosis, it really shocked me because I was pretty young and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. So my immediate thought was, I believe that the body can heal itself. I had known people who were diagnosed with cancer and had used natural remedies to cure themselves. And I said, if they can do it, I think I can do it too. So I immediately just started studying. I was a research engineer working in the defense industry in New Mexico. And, the first thing I did was I said, I think I'm just going to start researching. And I knew I needed to reduce my stress. So I quit my job. It was one of those turning points because I said, I'm going to focus on healing. And so I just started researching everything I possibly could about cancer, what causes cancer, what cures cancer, and just went on this quest to find that answer because I believed it was out there. And I really didn't want to do surgery, which means I'd be on medication for the rest of my life. When they took out my thyroid, it means I'd have to be dependent upon this. And I was a person who didn't even like to take aspirin, let alone be dependent on a medication to live. So I said, there's got to be a better way. So I started studying, and I went to a treatment center in Alabama that I found out about. And they taught me how to use food as medicine. And it was really eye-opening on what the body needs to heal. And as I kept researching, everything kept pointing to a whole foods, plant-based diet can heal your body. And I said, okay, so I immediately cut out all of processed foods, junk, dairy products, all of that, and went on a whole foods vegan diet, a low-fat diet. And I was expecting change to happen very, very quickly because at the treatment center I went to for 3 weeks to learn about healing, people were reversing their cancer very quickly. Tumors were shrinking within 3 weeks. So I thought mine should be gone. Mine was tiny. It should be gone, in a month. But nothing happened. So I stayed the course. And I said, sometimes, cancer doesn't pop up overnight. It takes years to develop. By the time we actually see it manifest, it's been there a long time. So I need to give my body time to heal. So I was really wanting to really understand what possibly could have caused my cancer. And so I studied, radiation is one of the things that affects the thyroid. And so I happened to live near a facility that tests your body for radioactive material. And so I went to this facility, and it turns out I had a high level of californium in my system, which is a man-made material, which isn't just found everywhere, but it was found at the lab where I worked. So I figured, well, maybe we have our answer now. So then I started focusing on detoxing, and detoxing my body of heavy metals and radiation. And of course I was told that this wouldn't work and that I should just go and have the surgery and, call it a day. But I didn't do that. I started detoxing my body using things like bentonite clay and all kinds of things that I was researching and finding how to do that. Meanwhile, continuing with the diet that I had stuck with. And so after that, I had given myself this year. I said I was going to give myself a year to follow this course. Because as you know, I had a lot of friends who were telling me, why are you risking your life doing this when you could just go and have the surgery had a lot of friends who were physicians who were telling me, so I had a lot of pressure to do this. But something, I tell people, you have to listen to your gut, right? And follow what makes sense to you. And I was like, I'm not an uninformed person. I'm studying this and I'm doing something. And I actually was feeling my body healing during this process. And so time went on, and that's when I went to the treatment facility. And then in August, I was taking so many supplements. I said, you know what? I think I'm doing too much. When you have to have a calendar of when to eat what, it can be overwhelming. So that's when I just designed my own nutrition plan. I said, I've been studying this for months now. I think I know more about cancer and thyroid cancer than most people, and definitely more than the doctors that I was going to see. And so I came up with my own nutrition plan and just, reduced it down to the things that would, I thought, boost my immune system and continue to fight cancer. And so when I went back in January, and it was almost a year now, and I was really saying, this is it. If there's no change, maybe it's time to go forward with the surgery. But what happened is when I went, my thyroid had been enlarged, but when I went back in January, it had shrunk to normal size. And I said, wow, that's incredible. And the interesting thing is the doctor didn't even tell me that. I had to read my own chart to see it and then ask him about it. And so, part of what I do is teach people how to take charge of their health, because you're the only person who cares the most about you than anybody else, right? So I said, you have to take charge. So that gave me hope. I said, well, if my thyroid could shrink, because he said he'd never seen anyone's thyroid shrink down to normal size, but I was doing things specifically to get my thyroid to shrink, like enzymes and other anti-inflammatory foods that I was using. So I was expecting that to happen. And so I said, I'm going to give it a little while longer. Because what I was monitoring my thyroid with ultrasounds to see if the tumor was shrinking. And it wasn't shrinking, but the thyroid shrunk. So I said, in March, this is time. I think, there's no change, but something said, let's do another biopsy and see maybe the tumor is still there, but it's no longer cancerous. And so that's what we did. We biopsied every nodule that was possible on my thyroid, over 20 needle pricks. And a week later, when I went back to the doctor, I got the news that there was no longer any cancer in my body. And thank you. She asked, when was that? That was in March of the following year, 2008. About 14 months of this journey of following that, and I was ecstatic. And that's one of the times I wish I could do cartwheels, because I would have cartwheeled out of the office because I was so overjoyed with that. And I immediately, I had a wellness party that weekend, all healthy vegan food, handouts about what I did and what people could do to take charge of their own health. And it really caused a shift in my life. Because what I was doing before as my job was defense work and optimizing weapon systems, which really wasn't what I wanted to do. Kind of went against my whole being. And so at that moment, I knew I couldn't go back to doing that. So you know what, I need to be doing something that is helping people, empowering people, and not a better way to maybe harm people. So I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But as, life went on, I got more and more invites to speak and teach, and it became obvious that this is what I was supposed to do. So I made that shift from engineering to holistic health and wellness, and I've never been happier. And so it's my life mission to now really teach other people how to do the same thing, and it's not as complicated as it seems. As I went from ground zero all the way to teaching myself from scratch how to do this, how to cook again, how to do everything. And so what I do now is shortcut that for people. You don't have to start where I did and take 10,000 supplements and then finally get down to the 5 or 6 that you need. And so that change was huge for me. And so what I'm going to talk about really here is just the basics of how to prevent and reverse pretty much most chronic diseases that are out there that we're told are progressive. That's why we call it chronic, meaning it's never going to go away. You can manage it. You can do things to improve it. But basically what they're saying is you're going to fall off the cliff. We're just going to slow down the falling off the cliff. And that's really not what people want, right? They want to stop and reverse. And that's what can be done when you follow the right approach, and specifically a really whole foods plant-based diet. So I took a very holistic approach to this. It wasn't just the diet. It was a lot of things. You know, stress is one of the #1 causes of disease, apart from environmental things and the things we put in our body. And that's why I quit, because the job was very stressful. I was on the go, as an entrepreneur. We were building an engineering firm, but it wasn't in my heart what I wanted to do. And when you actually make those decisions, you know, the universe has a way of opening doors for you, and you can walk through those. And I learned that during this process, to just set your intention and move forward. So the basic was definitely nutrition and exercise, because that's the easiest to start with when you're making a change. It's very concrete. You eat this, you don't eat that, you exercise. The next piece is the stress reduction, rest, relaxation, because our body does the healing when we're resting. And then the final piece for me was the emotional piece, because being trained in computer science as an engineer, everything has to make very concrete sense. And a lot of times the emotional piece isn't something I wanted to deal with, because I'm like, how does that affect my health? You know, let's just give me what I need to take and follow that. And that makes sense to me. It's a scientific approach. But then I began learning more about self-awareness and how our emotions also affect our health. And the mind-body connection is extremely powerful. So it was a very holistic approach. And I always encourage people that I coach that we have to deal with all of those things. You can't have, you know, a marriage that's falling apart and not deal with that when you're dealing with cancer, because a lot of times those things are linked. You know, a lot of times, you know, the loss of a child or a loved one is linked to the illness. And so you have to deal with all of that in order to truly heal. So some of the dietary guidelines I followed. A low-fat vegan diet. So I used to be a person, I was eating a lot of vegetarian processed foods. Almost everything I was eating before the cancer was in a box, in the microwave. I was on the go. Very few really live, fresh foods. So I had to switch that and start eating live, whole foods, things in their most natural state. I eliminated processed sugar. Sugar depresses the immune system very quickly. So that was one of the things. And I used to really, really love sweets. So I had to get rid of that. I eliminated, when you eliminate processed foods, you eliminate most of the things that are really markers of cheap food, you know, hydrogenated oil, high fructose corn syrup, those type of things basically are telling you this is cheap food just to make money. It's not about nutrition at all. So I got rid of all those things in my diet. I significantly increased the greens and vegetables to, you know, every meal, because that's where the life-giving force really is. I started juicing every day. I chose wheatgrass because it has so many properties of cleansing the blood and the nutrients that you can get in a small amount, and ginger and carrot juice, basically to give my body a boost every day, which was really a big part of the healing process, because it's also an anti-inflammatory. And inflammation is also a big trigger to most diseases. I started doing as much raw and unprocessed, you know, foods as possible, which means I had to learn how to cook. Again, basically start over. How do you get away from the box and the microwave and the 5-minute meals to making something that's quick but also tastes good? So I started making combinations of different foods. When I was at the treatment center, it was a wonderful place, but it was all about getting the nutrients you need. And a lot of times it was just very nasty, right? So it was hard to eat. It was one of the few times I did not look forward to eating, which was a big deal for me. It's like, you know, I have to eat this food, it's going to heal, so I'm going to do it. But it didn't taste very good. So I started looking at what we were eating, and I was thinking, you know, if you just combine these 3 things with that one, this would actually be a good meal, as opposed to eating it the way we're eating it. So my brain started working, and I started coming up with all these new recipes, because I knew that this had to be a lifestyle change. It wasn't just something you do, you get rid of the cancer and then go back to whatever you were doing before. So I was like, if this is something I'm going to stick to, it has to taste good, it has to be good for me, and so that it's something that I will follow for the long term and not just for now. So I got rid of the microwave. A lot of people have found out that the microwave kills the food, changes a lot of things in the food, and changes the structure of the food, and can make healthy food somewhat toxic. It does sometimes maintain certain nutrients, but it also kills a lot of other nutrients. So I stopped using that cold turkey, which was a big shift because I had a lot of boxed food in my refrigerator. But again, when your life is on the line, you do what's necessary. And I try to tell people, don't wait until that time when your life is on the line to make these changes. Make it when it's a little easier, when you can just do it right now. So instead of the microwave, I use a toaster oven. It doesn't kill the food. It just heats it up gently. There's ways to get around it. And then I started looking at different supplements that I needed, like systemic enzymes and aloe vera and herbs and lots of things that were really very nourishing to the body. And then daily exercise and stretching to relax my body, relax my mind. And so after I was doing this for a couple of months, I said, I think I'm the healthiest, most vibrant cancer patient I've ever seen, because I had switched to such a healthy diet. I felt so good and so energetic. And most people who are, in traditional cancer treatments aren't feeling that way, right? They're really feeling they're taking chemo or other things that's not making them feel so good. So really, it was one of the most challenging, but also one of the best times of my life, because I was giving my body everything it needed to heal. And then, as I mentioned, the last piece to this was really when I started seeing results, was when I made that connection to the mind-body. And so one of the things I said, when you speak things verbally, your mind takes those cues and your body makes them happen. So I stopped saying I had cancer. I said, I was diagnosed with cancer because I believed I was healing from cancer. So I said, I cannot say I have cancer while I'm actually healing from cancer, right? Because I'm basically speaking two opposite things here. So I didn't claim that anymore. What I was claiming is that I was going to be healed. So I changed my self-talk, and I started reading a lot of books, like Bernie Siegel and others, that talk about that mind-body connection and how people actually heal themselves sometimes with just the power of thought. So I said, if I'm doing the power of thought and this healthy diet, there's no way that I'm not going to heal. So I stopped saying anything negative about my healing process and just saying, I know this is going to happen, but knowing if it didn't, it would be okay, because I had done everything I possibly could to save my life in the way that I thought would work. And if I did have to go down that path of surgery, I could do it without regret and do that. But fortunately, I didn't have to do that. And so I replace any negative self-talk. And I tell people that all the time. When I coach people who have cancer, I can generally tell from our first meeting who's really going to have the easiest time and probably beat it very easily than those who won't, based upon their emotional state of mind. If they're thinking about death and a fear and all of that, it's very hard to allow even the nutritional things to work, because our mind is very powerful. So the first thing we have to work on is that hope and believing that what you're doing, even just straight nutritionally, will work, even from a scientific perspective. So I have to help people change their thinking. That is really the first step. And so that was very powerful for me. And then we get into the basics of disease prevention and reversal. So one of the main things is a good alkaline acid balance. So when we look at alkalinity and acidity, basically our body does a great job of keeping us at a certain point. And if you get too acidic, it's going to take nutrients from your body to make sure that you don't become too acidic, because you'll die. And so you can help your body in this process by eating more alkaline foods. And foods that are alkaline are fruits and vegetables. Foods that are highly acidic are meat, dairy, processed foods, coffee, soda. Those things are highly acidic. The things that are acidic, but kind of in the middle, on the low end of acidic, are beans and nuts and grains. So we're not saying you don't eat any acidic foods. It just so happens a typical American diet eats primarily acidic foods and not enough alkaline foods. So what your body is doing, it's robbing other nutrients from your body to keep this balance going on until it can't anymore. And then that's when your disease manifests itself. So during prevention, if you're just wanting to have a healthy lifestyle and prevent a disease, I recommend like 65% of your diet or more be alkaline at a minimum, meaning you're eating live foods, greens, berries, all kinds of fruits and vegetables. That should be 65% of your diet, meaning that you should have some live food at every meal, whether it's in a smoothie or at breakfast or whatever. You need to have live food every day. And then 35% acid foods. That's going to be your nuts, seeds, grains, legumes. If you're trying to do recovery, you really need to bump that up to either almost all raw or 80% raw, and then eating a smaller amount of cooked grains and nuts and seeds, because that's what the body needs to heal. Also, and I always say juicing is a very powerful piece of that in terms of in the recovery process for anyone. So you really want to consider juice fasting if you're in a very acute situation with the disease. That would be my first step. But you also want to reduce the waste transit time. And basically that means the time it takes from when you eat something to the time it comes out. And so if that is more than 36 hours, that's too long. And basically that's saying that these toxins that should have been out of your system are now starting to be reabsorbed into your system. And that toxicity over time can cause disease. So you want to reduce that down to 24 hours. When you're having a really good digestive process, it happens very quickly. And what happens is when you eat, it should trigger you needing to go. Just like babies, you know, when they eat, they generally have to go right after. That's how the body really works. But by the time we put so much junk in our system over the years, we lose that. But you can get that back. So you really want to reduce that transit time and see what's taking so long. And a lot of times we don't want to talk about waste, but it's very important because it's a good marker. You know, people say, well, how do I know what my transit time is? If you drink beet juice, you can wait and see, you know, when that comes out the other end, and you'll know, okay, how long did this take? So that's one way to actually find out that, you know, how long it took. So you can get a good marker, and you have to look and see. But that's very important because that's over 75% of disease starts in our gut, in our colon, in our digestive tract. So when you get that working process working well, then everything else starts to fall in place. So you want to reduce your toxin load. Obviously, when we eliminate meat from our diet, we're eliminating a lot of toxins, especially when you're dealing with cancer. You want to reduce the estrogen load. So a lot of times what they give cancer patients are medications to suppress estrogen. But they never tell them, you know, the primary sources of estrogen besides our cells is from meat and dairy products, from animal products. So in addition to the medication, they should be telling them, go on a plant-based diet because that will significantly reduce your estrogen load, as well as the toxins that you get, the pesticides that you get, the growth hormones that you get from those meat products. So you absolutely want to reduce that. You want to eat more of an organic diet when you are trying to recover, because you don't want to be putting the toxins in your system while you're trying to recover. That's loading your body up with more work that it has to do to get those toxins out. And I mentioned the estrogen levels. And then maintaining a proper body weight, because a lot of toxins are stored in fat cells. So the more fat cells there are, the more toxins, the more water and things it takes to clear that out. So it's very important to try to get down to that proper weight. And then exercise. Exercise does a lot. It helps waste come through our system very quickly and get out very quickly. It boosts the mood. It gives us endorphins, things that actually help heal the body. So it's very, very important. And then drinking a lot of water. A lot of chronic diseases or issues that people have, like back pain or arthritis or chronic headaches, migraine headaches, are really just a symptom of dehydration, of chronic dehydration. And when you begin to drink adequate water, which is generally about half your body weight in ounces of water a day, then those symptoms alleviate themselves just by drinking water. So people are taking all kinds of medication for back pain and arthritis when they could really alleviate a lot of that with simple water. So you want to be drinking a lot of pure, clean water. And then we can't underestimate the power of sleeping and resting, because the body does its repair work while we're resting. And I always tell people, your genetics do not determine your health destiny. And we've been programmed to think that, because every time you go to the doctor, they want your family history of your grandmother or your mother, basically to tell you the likelihood of that, what disease you're going to get. And really how that works is not a determination that you are going to get this disease, because studies show that less than 10% of disease is really genetic. So that means 90% of the disease is really based upon what you're doing and your lifestyle, not what your mother and grandmother had. What it really tells you is if you get a disease, this is probably the disease you will get. So if your mother and grandmother had breast cancer, if you get cancer, you'll probably have breast cancer. It doesn't mean you will get breast cancer. And that's the distinction. And because traditional medicine doesn't fully acknowledge the way cancer and things are developed, they don't either know it or don't tell you that you have complete control of that. So instead of worrying about breast cancer or other cancers, worry about or be concerned with what I need to do to stay well in general, and you can avoid that altogether. You know, because I was deathly afraid of getting diabetes because my grandmother had diabetes, and I would see her give herself these insulin shots in the thigh every day, and I was thinking if I had diabetes I would die because I would never be able to put a needle in my leg. So I'm not going to get that. So that's what I was concerned with until I learned that I don't have to worry about diabetes. I just have to worry about the proper diet that maintains my body, that feeds my body, and basically will never be an issue for me, diabetes, with a whole foods plant-based diet. So that's a big change for people to think, especially when we're in this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I really wish they would change it to Breast Cancer Prevention Month so that we teach people that you can do more than just be tested early. You can actually do something that actually reduces the likelihood that you'll ever get cancer. And that's what we're trying to talk about here today. And that's by eliminating the things that generally cause it, primarily one being our diet. So you really want to eat the rainbow, a variety of colors. And I like to use that because it just gives you the visual. The more colorful your plate is, the more nutrients that you are getting. Different colors represent different vitamins and antioxidants that you're getting from food. So a red bell pepper is going to have different nutrients than a green bell pepper. So you want your plate to be very colorful. And that's just one very easy way. If you're eating a very monotone plate, that's telling you you're not getting a well-rounded nutrients. I tell people when you go to like a fast food restaurant, KFC or something, everything's brown and golden, right? So that's not a colorful plate. You're not getting a lot from that. And then supplements to consider when you're trying to reverse or prevent disease. Vitamin D3. The studies show, and you can look this up, almost every American is deficient in vitamin D3 unless you're taking a supplement. And over the long term, this lack of vitamin D3 sets you up for cancer, diabetes, and a lot of other diseases. It's amazing because it's really a hormone that affects the way every other vitamin, mineral, and hormone works in your body. So this chronic, being deficient in vitamin D3 is very troubling, and so you should be taking quite a bit of it. The recommended daily allowance is very low, and they've just started to raise it to about 800 to 1,000 units a day, which is still incredibly too low. The recommended amount is a minimum of 5,000 international units a day, up to 10,000 a day. That's what you should be taking to maintain the proper amount of vitamin D in your system. Now, if you're spending every day in the sun in a swimsuit, you probably don't need as much, but most of us aren't doing that. We're covered, there's winter time and things like that, so there's no way to really get enough vitamin D just by spending 10 or 20 minutes in the sun every day. Now, it's helpful to do that, but it's not going to be enough. So lack of vitamin D is another primary cause of a lot of diseases. So if you want to heal, you have to take at least the 5,000 to 10,000, and if you have cancer or something else, you're going to have to take a lot more, like 20,000 units a day to really get the stores replenished. I always recommend a whole food multivitamin, meaning a vitamin that's made from food and not synthetics. Meaning that you could take it on an empty stomach and it wouldn't give you an upset stomach because it's actually food and not a lot of dyes. So you're not wanting to really get your vitamin from the local drugstore. A lot of them aren't going to be very good. It should say whole food vitamin because we have a lot of micronutrients that we might miss even on a very healthy vegan plant-based diet. There are things that we need to get and you don't want to miss those things. So And then vitamin B12. We all know that that can sometimes be challenging to get on a vegan diet. If you're taking a whole food multivitamin, most likely it's in there, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. But if not, you want to be sure you're taking it. And then there are two forms of it. And I always tell people the methylcobalamin is the one you want because it absorbs better in the body, much quicker, easier. So 5 food additives to avoid like the plague. And basically, by avoiding these things means you're going to stop eating junk food altogether. So these are high fructose corn syrup, which has mercury and other things. And you see commercials saying, "Oh, it's just corn sugar." It's not the same thing. You want to eliminate anything that has high fructose corn syrup. Trans fat, we all know that's no good, right? Hydrogenated oil, partially hydrogenated oil. You're going to find it in all of the baked goods, peanut butters, ketchup, a lot of different things. Probably not ketchup. You'll find the high fructose corn syrup in ketchup. But a lot of things, especially crackers and baked goods, you're going to find hydrogenated oil. You want to eliminate that. The body doesn't know how to process that properly. So it's a toxin to the body. And the thing about trans fat, it raises your bad cholesterol and lowers the good cholesterol, which is the opposite of what we want, right? So another reason to eliminate that. Artificial food coloring. Anything that's got yellow number 6 or number 5, that is a synthetic chemical that is very harmful to the brain. It's a neurotoxin. It's one of the factors in ADHD and headaches and things like that, and a lot of neuromuscular diseases like MS, Parkinson's, are affected by both artificial food coloring, monosodium glutamate, and aspartame. Neurotoxins, all of those. So you want to eliminate anything that has that. Basically, monosodium glutamate is there just as an addictive property to enhance the flavor, but it's very toxic to the system. The same with aspartame or any of the fake sugars, any of them, Splenda included, neurotoxins. And they actually make you gain weight, not lose weight, because the body is expecting sugar, so it starts releasing insulin and things in preparation for the sugar. The sugar never gets there, and now you have a metabolic syndrome going on with just because you drank fake sugar. It would be better to drink the real thing, which I don't recommend either, but this is a neurotoxin, so you want to eliminate anything that's got fake food, basically. And these, anytime you see these in food, you know that it's a very cheap product made for the masses. And hopefully we're more aware here that, just switching to a vegan diet is great, but if you really want to maintain your health, you also want to switch to a whole foods diet and eliminate these things as well. So what should you eat instead? Does someone have the time? Make sure how I'm doing. Okay, 12:43. Oh, 23. Okay, great. All right. So the things we should eat instead, basically the new 4. When I worked at PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, we talked a lot about the 4 food groups, the new 4 that we were talking about, and that's your fruits, vegetables, and your beans and grains. That is where you can get all the nutrients that you need for your body in a much better way, the proteins that you need, everything that you need, without loading your body with other things that are very toxic to it. So the advantages of a plant-based diet. People who follow a plant-based diet generally live longer, anywhere from 5 to 7 years longer. Studies show that they have less heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, obesity, gallstones, all of the things that are primary killers in our society today. When you switch to a whole foods plant-based diet, this is greatly reduced. So there's a study of over 60,000 participants done over several years called the Adventist Health Study. And what it showed was that the closer you got to a completely plant-based diet, the less issues you had in terms of your body mass index. So on the red line, you'll see a basic non-vegetarian diet. The next one's like semi-vegetarian. I'm vegetarian sometimes, most of the time. Pesco-vegetarian. Pesco-vegetarian is when you're eating fish and mostly vegetarian. Then lacto-ovo is where you're eating eggs and dairy. And then vegan. And you can see how it's consistently going down, that the closer you are to a vegan diet, the greater is that your body mass index is where it should be, which is around 24, and you get closer to that. It also shows the prevalence of type 2 diabetes is greatly reduced as you get closer to that vegan diet, starting with the non-vegetarian on the 7.6% to down to 2.9 on a plant-based diet. Basically, everything else being the same, with just changing your diet, you're reducing the probability that you're going to deal with these issues. And that's a very compelling argument there. The next question that I get a lot is, do I have to always eat organic? And the question is no. If you can, that's great, but I know that sometimes that can be expensive for people. So I often kind of go, there's the Environmental Working Group has a great list of the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen to basically guide you on what should always be organic and what shouldn't. And on the list here, we have the highest pesticides levels, meaning those things should always be organic. Your apples, your berries, your leafy greens, you want to buy those organic. On the other side, we have things that are hardly sprayed, so you can save some money and not worry about that. And after you keep shopping, you kind of keep this list in your head. So surprisingly, asparagus and kiwi and mangoes, those things are hardly sprayed, so you can save money there by not necessarily having to buy organic. So that's a little tip. For people who say it's too expensive, where there's a will, there's a way. The Environmental Working Group, and you can find it online. And so things that people often ask, well, what if I switch to a plant-based diet, what do I eat instead? Or if I'm not eating junk food, what do I eat instead? And so these are some of the examples. So, for example, if you're eating Pop-Tarts, which has food coloring, hydrogenated oil, and high fructose corn syrup, and dairy in a lot of cases, you want to switch to something like a whole grain bagel with almond butter. Easy switch, it's not that big of a deal. If you're eating sugary cereals with milk, you can eat more healthy whole grain cereals with almond milk. You can even make your own milks. I have videos on my website shows you how to make pumpkin seed milk in 5 minutes or less. So there are things you can do that aren't as hard as you think, but as you get more into it, it becomes a way of life. Instead of turkey sandwich, for example, you can do hummus with a bean spread and avocado and tomato, one of my favorite quick meals. So there are ways to do it. Instead of milkshakes, you can have smoothies. There are ways to do this without it being burdensome. You just have to do a little digging, a little education, and that's what I do on my website. I have lots of recipes, and I started making videos. Primarily, it began for my clients, but it grew from that because a lot of people hadn't heard of how to make, for example, tuna using sunflower seeds. So I made a video to show them how to do that, and it's been very helpful for people. It's just part of the re-education. So a sample day, and we'll go through this pretty quickly. It could be something like, if you're switching to a vegan diet, and how many people here are completely vegan? Okay, quite a few. How many are thinking about it? Okay, great. And you can take steps one at a time and whatever works best for you, but just stay the course. It can be something like a smoothie. I have a wonderful black sesame raw rice dish, large green salad, things like that, a broccoli almond stir fry, very easy to make in like 15 minutes, so it doesn't have to be overwhelming, but you serve it with something like brown rice or quinoa. You don't have to worry about getting your protein when you're eating a balanced diet. The next day, it's something like steel-cut oatmeal, which has lots of nutrients and protein, cranberry quinoa, and kale salad. I have recipes for those. And then dinner is something like a curry soup with a mixed salad. And then there are a lot of snacks in between with your fruit, your trail mix, your bean dips, and things like that in between your meals that you can have. And so if you need recipes, please do visit my site. I make videos so it's easy for people, and they're all tested thoroughly on people who aren't vegetarian or vegan, and they love the food. I happen to be in a community that has a lot of mixed diets, and so I get to test it on a lot of people. And I'm like, if the carnivores love it, then I'm sure you'll love it too. So I encourage you to go there and check it out because I have a lot of resources there. So I'm going to stop there and take some questions. Okay, right here.
This is Joel Steen, future TV in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
His mother, 25 years ago, had this liver cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor said she only had 2 weeks to live.
Okay.
She gave up all the doctors, all the therapy, and she started using her mind, praying to God.
Mm-hmm.
She's still alive.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the mind is extremely powerful.
It is.
Help you cure your disease. That's what she is, praying to God in the Bible.
Absolutely.
Throughout the day. What do you use?
Good question. So his question, for those who couldn't hear it, he said Joel Osteen's, was it his wife, cancer or some illness and liver cancer, and started just praying and positive thinking and got rid of it, asked what do I use. I definitely used it quite a bit. I definitely prayed more. I started meditating more. I started using visualization every day. I visualized cancer leaving my body, just exploding and going out. And I tell people, whatever works for you, whatever visual works for you. And that was very empowering. So that was definitely part of my routine, was prayer and meditation and visualization.
How old were you?
She said, how old was I when I got the cancer? 35. Okay. There.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the lecture. Basically, almost everything you said makes sense in terms of research that I've done. The only thing I have a question about is Colin Campbell, John McDougall, I believe Paul Esselstyn, all of them say that you don't need to take multivitamins. So if you're eating a really diverse foods, diet,
Sure.
so that's the one question I just wondered about the need for that. I mean,
Right. And so for those who didn't hear, he's talking about the need for supplementation if you're eating a whole foods diet. Generally, if you're eating very healthy and you're juicing and doing all those things, you may not need it, with the exception of D3. I would cause exception with that because it's just unless you're spending a lot of time in the sun, you're going to be deficient. I don't believe in over-supplementing, but I think it has its place. Some people have different nutritional needs, and you need to be sensitive to that. It's not a one-diet-fits-all approach. So I found, for me, supplementation and a few things definitely helps. I mean, I use chia seeds and what we call superfoods and things like that that are that really boost the nutritional value of my smoothies. And I think that works for me as opposed to just trying to take a chance really with maybe missing something. So to me, it's an insurance policy, some of the supplements, that maybe not be necessary if you're eating a very natural diet, but it doesn't hurt when you're taking a very whole foods approach and supplements that don't have additives, preservatives, and toxic things in them. So, you have a question there?
Yes, I've been to restaurants outside of San Francisco, probably in San Francisco, where I tell the person taking the order, I'm vegan, and they look at me with a blank stare and say,
Okay.
I'm vegan. Do you go to restaurants when you're outside of
Sure.
San Francisco? And
Absolutely. How do I do it? Yes, I do go to restaurants, especially when I'm traveling. And so what I do is I choose ethnic restaurants, more like Thai restaurants, Japanese restaurants, Indian restaurants that naturally have plant-based options on the menu. It's much easier. I try to avoid the steakhouses because I'm probably going to be stuck with the salad and a baked potato. But, there are ways to do it. So you have to, first choose a restaurant that has more diverse food. And I stay away from the chain restaurants because generally they use all of those 5 things that I said avoid in their food quite a bit. So local restaurants, ethnic restaurants, Ethiopian, for example, has lots of vegan food already on the menu. So you just kind of save yourself the headache by choosing things that are naturally geared towards you. And then when I do go and I don't see a vegan option on the menu, I do ask, can you leave the cheese off? Can you leave the dairy? I usually don't use the word vegan that much because a lot of times there's a stigma, but sometimes I do depending on what part of the country I'm in. So that I think people are already, sympathetic to it. So you can just ask. They're usually very willing if you're very nice and don't have a judgmental approach to it. A lot of times we tend to do that. Just be very nice and can you leave this off? Can you leave that off? They make modifications for everyone else. There'd be no reason they wouldn't if they could.
Question about organic, certified organic and non-GMO. For example, Trader Joe's has a lot of produce might come from Mexico, but it does, China will be organic. But my concern is I don't know how stringent the
Right.
standards are for organic and non-GMO, and I've read a lot of controversy. So, what can
Sure. So the question about organic and non-organic and can you trust it, basically. There's always so much. I try to be very vigilant about that and look at different, like when I'm buying packaged foods, where they source from. I generally say try to shop local farmers markets, things like that, so you kind of can get to know that person, their farming practices. And then, to me, it's do the best you can and don't get too caught up in the details. So if we know certain manufacturers use GMOs and there's lists all over the place, avoid those. Once you do that, relax and just do the best you can. That's my approach.
When I ask a lot of growers, they'll say, well, we don't spray anything on it. So I wonder, what is the impact of the soil as far as not being organic?
Right. I mean, a lot of growers have not gotten the certification because I understand it's fairly expensive and takes a couple of years. And so they don't. They're actually growing what we consider organic. They just haven't gotten the certification. And to me, that's great. We can support them. And the soil is definitely better and more nutritious. Okay, I'll go here.
Yeah, when you were making the transition from a regular meat processed diet to vegetarian vegan, were you experiencing any side effects that maybe it involved your body detoxing from not just the chemicals you were exposed to at your workplace, but even the chemicals in the food?
Sure.
Did you experience
Side effects?
Side effects, and how did you overcome that?
So did I experience side effects during the transition? I was not eating really a meat-based diet already. I was just eating a very processed, mostly vegetarian diet. So when I switched to vegan, I did immediately go to the treatment center. And so I did a lot of detoxing there. So that was a very, yes, I was feeling sometimes weak, sometimes not, because I was taking a lot of things, doing hydrotherapy, all kinds of things. So a lot of my detoxing happened in a very concise time period. So it was very shocking to the system. And then other things, yes, but generally I felt great. I did not have, other than that process, I did not have a lot of downtime, so to speak, except when you're doing certain like heavy metal detox, you will get tired and you have to replenish the metals in your system and things like that. But generally it was a good process. And most people have a fairly good process when they transition. They might say, I go to the bathroom a lot more. I'm like, good, that's a good thing. Or maybe gas, and you have to get used to eating more fiber and things like that. So I'll go over here. You had a question?
Hi. First of all, thank you for the lecture. It's very inspiring, and I like that you made it very applicable to our lives. And I also agree that a healthy diet is important to treating medical issues and not enough attention paid to them. But what I found in a lot of, I'm a student at UCSF, and a lot of my, at least clinical experiences I've had, a lot of my patients either have large families or they don't have a lot of money, and a lot of these suggestions I find that they're like, I can't afford to feed my family this way, like eating organic or juicing or
Right.
eating quinoa and chia even. What are some tips?
Sure. And I do a special presentation on eating healthy on a budget. So basically, if you're money is an issue, which for a lot of us it is, you want to stay away from the packaged vegan foods, vegetarian foods. That's where the money is, where it's going to cost you. When you start, you want to focus more on the bulk section of the grocery store. I spend most of my time, 80% of my time, in the produce section and the bulk bean and grain section. You can save a lot of money there. When you compare the cost of meat to a pound of beans, the beans win hands down. So you're going to want to just focus on more. You're going to have to prepare a little bit more, but it stretches a lot farther. There's lots of chili recipes. You're just going to be eating just healthier food, but not necessarily all the gourmet organic food. And I say, if you can't do organic, that's fine. Cutting out meat and dairy alone reduces your pesticide levels so dramatically that your body can compensate for the pesticides that you're getting in the food. So that's step one. So don't worry about it. It's like when you can do better, do better. When you can afford more, do more. But you absolutely want to stop putting in the primary problems and then just going more natural. Using the farmer's market where you get a lot of food cheap and using the bulk sections of the grocery store and just buying more just fresh vegetables and fruits, and not worrying necessarily about organic until you can move up to that step. Sure. Thank you.
Hi, I want to know what resources you came across that made you come to the conclusion that microwave is a bad option.
Well, quite a bit. I think when I was first introduced to it, it was when I went to the treatment facility. But I started doing my research on my own when I got back. And like, for example, one of the studies that I read, and if you just go online and do some research, you'll find lots of information about it. But for example, they say don't heat baby milk in the microwave. And we think it's because of the unevenness, you could scorch it or something, but it kills the vitamin K in the milk. And so it's known not to do that. I'm like, if it can kill the vitamin K in that milk, what is it killing in other foods? So there were a lot of articles like that that I read that were convincing to me that allowed me to just stop using the microwave right off. And there are so many. I don't have the list with me now, but I do have like an archive. If you're interested, you can email me. My email address is here. I'd be happy to forward some. Okay. Pardon me?
The detox system you went through?
Sure. There are a lot. Oh, you're saying which specific one? There's a place called Uchee Pines in Seal, Alabama, way out in the country. Because I just didn't know what to do. So that was my first step. There are a lot of lifestyle treatment centers around. Basically, a lot of them focus on juicing and detox. You can do your own detox, like doing a 14-day fast. Juicing fast would be very helpful. But there are a lot of resources. If you've never done it before, you do want to get some help from some type of a healthcare provider to kind of walk you through that. But it's not a complicated process. Okay. Right. So with the B12, not really. If you're taking the methylcobalamin, it's pretty much going to absorb. With the D3, if you're taking high amounts of D3, you do need to take K2 as well, because high amounts over a long period can deplete your K2. So you can get a D3 that has vitamin K2 in it. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're taking 5,000 units a day, it's not high enough to cause an imbalance. But if you're recovering and you need to take a high amount, you want to take either K2 with it or get it that has it in there. The multivitamin is not going to have enough D3 in it to be high enough. But if you're taking a multivitamin with D3, then you don't have to worry about K2 or anything else. Yeah. Okay. Are we almost out of time? I don't want to keep too far over. Okay. Well, I really appreciate the time to share with you today. I have a lot of information over on the table, a lot of articles and recipes. And I also make really delicious organic, vegan, chocolate-dipped macaroons that are gluten-free, soy-free, and all that too, because you can still have healthy sweets and not kill yourself. So those are available as well. So thank you very much.